This program is supported by
SMC Global Power, North Luzon Express Terminal, RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation, Stark Molecular Laboratory.
Demonstrators turned violent in Rennes City Center as results of the first round of the presidential runoff in France were announced.
Some 500 people marched through the streets and set construction equipment on fire. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am CJ Hirro.
And I am Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines.
France's Macron and Le Pen head for cliffhanger election runoff on April 24. Violent demonstrations erupt in the city of Rennes following the announcement of the first round results. Russian missiles destroyed an airport in central Ukraine. 5 emergency workers injured in the attack. 1 died, 2 hurt as tropical storm Agaton hits southern Philippines. More than 1,000 stuffed wild animals confiscated in Spain. And Hollywood actor Will Smith slapped with a 10-year Oscar ban.
After leading the field in Sunday's voting, French President Emmanuel Macron and his populist rival Marine Le Pen will meet in a runoff. They will face each other in a final round on April 24 when the candidate with more than 50% will be declared the winner. Maricar Velasco files this report.
There is no doubt French President Emmanuel Macron and his far-right rival Marine Le Pen will square off at the final round of the presidential election on April 24. With more than 90% of the vote counted in the first round, projections showed Macron scoring 28 to 29%, with Le Pen on 22 to 24%. The two are set to prepare for a tough campaign in the next 2 weeks that promises to be tighter compared to their first encounter 5 years ago. The latest polls show Le Pen rising fast ahead of Sunday's first round and only slightly behind Macron in the event of another runoff between them. Le Pen supporters believe that her change of image from 5 years ago gave her the chance to rise in this year's election. Her supporters claim Le Pen is more confident, less error-prone, and more in tune with the country. On the other hand, Macron performed slightly better than expected and won immediate support from most of his defeated rivals ahead of the runoff, despite entering the campaign late and holding just one rally. Macron told his supporters that nothing has been decided yet because the debate in the next 2 weeks will be decisive for France and Europe. An average of polls puts the arch-nationalist Le Pen on 47% and the pro-EU President Macron on 53%. Maricar Velasco for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Riot police descended upon Rennes City after the announcement of the first round results of France's presidential election led to violent demonstrations. Some 500 people marched through the streets of the city center chanting anti-capitalist and anti-fascist slogans. Street furniture was destroyed and the windows of banks were damaged. The demonstrators also started a blaze lit with construction equipment, which firefighters eventually put out.
Pride and disappointment. This is what the majority of Jean-Luc Mélenchon's supporters felt following the first round of results of Sunday's French presidential election. French President Emmanuel Macron topped the first round of presidential elections, beating far-right rival Marine Le Pen by a larger-than-expected margin and setting up what is expected to be a tight runoff between the pair later this month. Mélenchon came third in the first round of the runoff with a projected score of 20 to 21%. Some supporters believe that if Mélenchon got the support of the Communist Party, he would have qualified for the next round. Meanwhile, several candidates from Sunday's runoff threw their support to Macron. With a combined win of 14% of the first round, candidates Valérie Pécresse, Anne Hidalgo, Yannick Jadot, and Fabien Roussel said they will endorse Macron to block a far-right presidency. Meanwhile, number 4 in the runoff and anti-immigration candidate Eric Zemmour will back Le Pen.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has been ousted from power after losing a no-confidence vote in his leadership. The no-confidence vote took place after the country's Supreme Court ruled in favor of opposition parties and said that Khan had acted unconstitutionally. Opposition leader Shehbaz Sharif is expected to be chosen as the new prime minister, but the country faces a new political crisis as Khan supporters poured into the streets. Thousands of Khan supporters held placards, waved flags promoting Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party, and chanted slogans. Khan repeatedly accused Pakistan's opposition parties of working with the United States to oust him. But the U.S. government has said there is no truth in these allegations, and Khan never provided any evidence to support his claims.
On the weekend, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson strolled around the streets of Kyiv in war-ravaged Ukraine. He was accompanied by Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky as they walked through the Ukrainian capital. Surrounded by armed soldiers, the two mingled and spoke with residents as they made their way through the city. Johnson made the unplanned visit to the Ukrainian capital for talks in a show of support for the country. At a news conference, Johnson had harsh words for Russian President Vladimir Putin following the discovery of civilian bodies in Ukrainian towns.
What Putin has done in places like Bucha and in Irpin, his war crimes, have permanently polluted his reputation and the reputation of his government.
Russia earlier denied accusations that Russian forces were responsible for killing civilians in Bucha.
The Russia-Ukraine conflict continues unabated. The latest target, the airport in the city of Dnipro. Ukrainian officials said the airport has been destroyed by Russian shelling. There's no official word on the extent of casualties yet. Meanwhile, in Frankfurt, Germany, pro-Russian protesters rallied on the weekend. They're demanding an end to the discrimination they say they have suffered since the conflict. Since Germany is home to more than 1 million people of Russian origin and 325,000 from Ukraine, authorities fear the conflict could be imported into Germany. Authorities recorded 383 anti-Russian offenses and 181 anti-Ukrainian offenses since the start of the war on February 24. While all of this is happening, European Union foreign ministers meet today to discuss the 6th round of sanctions against Russia. It's unlikely, though, they will boycott Russian oil and gas exports at this time, despite Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's call for such a ban.
Here in the Philippines, heavy rains brought massive floods in most parts of Visayas and Mindanao as Tropical Depression Agaton with international name Meggy battered several provinces. According to the Weather Bureau Pag-asa, Agaton remains almost stationary. Signal number 2 has been raised over more areas in Visayas and Mindanao as Agaton maintained its strength and moved slowly westward over the coastal waters of Guian. Provinces under storm signal number 2 include the southern portion of eastern Samar, the southern portion of Samar, the northeastern portion of Leyte in Visayas, and the northern portion of Dinagat Islands in Mindanao. Signal number 1, meanwhile, is raised over the rest of eastern Samar, northern Samar, Leyte, Biliran, southern Leyte, and the northeastern portion of Cebu, including Camotes Islands, Surigao del Norte, and the rest of Dinagat Islands. Agaton is packing maximum sustained winds of 17 or 75 kilometers per hour near the center and a gustiness of up to 105 kilometers per hour.
In related news, at least one person died, 2 were hurt, and 1 went missing after Tropical Storm Agaton hit Visayas and Mindanao. Based on the latest bulletin of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, the sole fatality and missing person are both from Region 11, while the 2 injured are from Region 10. Overall, about 86,515 families or 136,390 individuals were affected by Agaton. 3,717 families or 13,049 individuals were evacuated and are now staying in evacuation centers. Meanwhile, 2,362 passengers, 1,180 rolling cargoes, and 6 vessels were stranded in some affected regions. As the assessment of infrastructure damage continues, a total of 874,000 pesos worth of damage in agriculture has been reported in Region 12 and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. The NDRRMC has also recorded 52 damaged houses, 3 of which were totally damaged. Coming up, Queen Elizabeth II of Britain describes COVID-19 experience following recovery. 350,000 severely malnourished children will die, experts warn, amid Somalia's worst drought in a decade. Israeli troops on offensive after Tel Aviv attacks. Tensions high as demonstrators take to the streets in support of last week's attackers. Mata ng Agila International will return with these stories.
This portion is brought to you by
318 Automart.
Arlex Trading and Construction Supplies.
Mr. Bawal, ang galing mo namang sumayaw. Pwedeng pa-copy ng dance steps mo?
Oo naman, Mr. Pwede.
Mr. Bawal, ang ganda rin ng forma mo. Pwedeng pa-copy ng forma mo?
Oo ba?
Mr. Bawal, pa-copy naman sagot mo.
Yan ang hindi pwede. ang pagsilip sa sagot ng iba, lalong-lalo na sa botohan. Oy! Bawal yan!
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, ang pagtatangkang silipin at alamin ang boto ng iba ay isang election offense.
Mr. Pwede? Please report to the principal's office.
Ako si Mr. Bawal, nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang pagsilip sa boto ng ibang botante. Oy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
As COVID-19 rages through Shanghai, people in the Chinese port city are enduring a second week of lockdown. And the impacts of such quarantine measures is being felt worldwide. Shanghai is the world's busiest port and China's financial hub, but most of its factories have been shut down. Those still operating can't find drivers and other workers to move their goods. To make matters worse, the port has been sealed off for a week now, bringing shipping to a halt. The European Chamber of Commerce in China fears the consequences of a prolonged lockdown in the country's most populous city.
And I'm sure that if this lockdown continues for a couple of weeks or even months, because we do not know how fast the government is able to contain this pandemic, it will have quite an impact on business revenues and profit.
Frightening, tiring, exhausted. These are the three words used by Queen Elizabeth II to describe her battle with COVID-19. The British monarch, who will turn 96 on April 21st, spoke of her experience with the coronavirus during a virtual visit to the Royal London Hospital. She also said that being sick was very hard because she could not see her family. At that time, Buckingham Palace said the vaccinated monarch had mild cold-like symptoms and was able to carry on with light duties. But later on, she was obliged to cancel her scheduled public appearance as well as a series of appointments with foreign diplomats.
As temperatures drop in Australia, the COVID-19 winter dose rollout begins for eligible individuals. Australian health authorities are saying this extra layer of protection is especially helpful this season. Eliza Ventura reports.
Winter is coming, and so is COVID's second booster dose for Australians.
Over 95% of the Australian population are fully vaccinated. And as the colder months approaches, the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, or ATAGI, recommends an additional booster dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. ATAGI says the eligible candidates for the winter booster dose are the identified vulnerable groups to the COVID-19 infection. These include adults over the age of 65 and older, residents of aged care or disability care facilities, individuals aged 16 and older who are severely immunocompromised, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people aged 50 years and older. The winter booster may be given from 4 months since they last had their first booster dose, or 4 months after a confirmed COVID infection if they had the infection after the first booster dose.
The winter booster dose rollout has started this month. Eliza Ventura, Mata ng Agila International, Townsville, Australia. Trusted, connected, on point.
Now, children are paying the price as Somalia faces what experts are calling its worst drought in a decade. Parents are struggling to feed their children, while nearly half of the country's under fives are at risk of acute malnutrition by June. Adam Abdel Mula of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warned that if nothing is done, it is predicted that by the summer of this year, 350,000 of the 1.4 million severely malnourished children in the country will perish. With the prices for food and water surging, the UN said almost 700,000 people have been forced to leave their homes in search for food and water for themselves and their animals. And the numbers keep on rising.
Now, Israeli forces raided the Flashpoint West Bank district of Jenin as Prime Minister Naftali Bennett warned the Jewish state had gone on the offensive. In his weekly cabinet meeting, Bennett vows to settle accounts with everyone who was linked, either directly or indirectly, to the attacks. In recent weeks, Israel has been stunned by a string of attacks. Several of them were shooting sprees targeting civilians, and some were carried out by assailants linked to or inspired by the Islamic State group. Military operation entered its second day as Israel buried 3 civilians killed in last Thursday's shooting spree, and the Palestinian militant groups in Jenin warned they were mobilizing fighters. The military spokesman of the armed factions in Jenin's refugee camp announced a state of alert and called for general mobilization of fighters to confront any incursion by their Zionist enemy. Mosques in Jenin told civilians to vacate the streets, according to local residents. Gun battles rocked the Jenin area for a second day Sunday, with at least 10 Palestinians wounded, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, and more than 20 arrested, according to an Israeli military source.
Tensions are rising in Israel as protesters in the West Bank district of Jenin took to the streets. Demonstrators rallied in support of the gunmen who launched 2 deadly attacks in Tel Aviv in recent weeks. Jenin is the home of shooters. On Sunday, Israeli forces raided the district. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said Israel has gone on the offensive. The Israeli government is also considering stripping the families of terrorists who are residents and citizens of Israel of their state pensions and other benefits.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or AMLO, promised not to seek re-election after serving out his current term. Obrador made the vow as he thanked his supporters after surviving a referendum on whether he should step down or complete his term. Although the vote is favorable to Obrador, initial results showed low voter turnout. Elected in 2018 for a 6-year term, the 68-year-old president won a majority of around 90.3 to 91.9% in favor of his staying in office until 2024. This was according to a preliminary vote count by the National Electoral Institute. The turnout rate was between 17 and 18.2%, meaning that even if López Obrador had lost, the result would not have been legally binding. Supporters of the referendum, the first of its kind in Mexico, said it was a way of increasing democratic accountability, giving voters the opportunity to remove the president due to loss of confidence. But critics saw it as expensive propaganda and an unnecessary distraction from the many challenges facing the country, including drug-related violence, poverty, and the rising cost of living.
Ecuador's former Vice President Jorge Glass, jailed for corruption involving the Brazilian company Oberdrek, was freed on parole. While serving a 6-year sentence for receiving millions of dollars in kickbacks from the construction giant, Glass was sentenced last year to a separate 8-year term for misuse of public funds. Video on social networks showed Glass exiting the Latacunga prison and receiving a warm welcome from dozens of supporters. Meanwhile, in neighboring Peru, ex-President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski was also granted conditional freedom by a court after serving 36 months of house arrest. Kuczynski had been under house arrest since April 2019, awaiting trial on money laundering charges. He became the first Latin American president to resign over alleged connections to the Odebrecht corruption scandal. The Odebrecht corruption or company doled out millions in bribes to officials in exchange for public work contracts. Up next, overseas Filipinos first to cast votes in the high-stakes pandemic-era 2022 Philippine elections. Spanish authorities seized more than 1,000 taxidermied animals, including hundreds of endangered or extinct species. And Indonesian thrill seekers dine in the sky as COVID-19 curbs ease. These and more stories around the globe when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by Quezon City Motor Vehicle Inspection Center, Robig Builders.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Sa studio o kahit naka-work from home, hindi magpapapigil sa pagtalakay sa napapanahong issue at hanapin ang maiinit na balitang kailangan nating malaman.
Kami pong dalawa ay may sakit. Now, more than ever, kailangan po ninyo ang tamang impormasyon.
Asahan ninyong laging hahanapan ng kasagutan ang lahat ng mga ASPN nyo.
So ngayon, ang pakiusap ngayon, ang Pangulong Duterte sana ay mag-call ng special session ng Kongreso para ito po ay maipasa itong panukala ninyo. Ano po ang balita doon? May update na po ba tayo?
Ano sa palagay nyo? Kasama si Ali Soto at Pat P. Daza. Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 8 ng umaga. Simulcast niyong mapapanood sa Net25 TV, Facebook at YouTube channel. Radyo Agila 1062 AM.
Overseas Filipinos began casting their votes for the 2022 national elections on April 10. Filipinos around the world have turned up in various embassies and consulate offices to cast their votes on-site or through postal voting. They have also started using automated official ballots, unlike the previous elections. So far, hundreds of Filipinos have shown up to exercise their right to vote at the embassy and the consular service in Phuket, Thailand.
Well, we are looking forward to the next administration to change the life of OFWs for the better.
What do OFWs in Thailand expect of the next administration? Here are some of their views.
Ang mahalal na Pangulo ng Republika ng Pilipinas ay yung ipagpatuloy ang magandang sinimulan ng papalitan niyang presidente para sa pag-unlad ng ating bansa.
Sana yung mga OFW natin ay laging nabibigyan ng pansin lalo sa kanilang mga pangangailangan at healthcare service, tapos yung oras ng kagipitan kung sila ay nagkakaroon ng problema sa ibang bansa, sana yung mga nasa ahensya ng gobyerno matuluguran agad yung kanilang pangangailangan.
Several shootings in Iceland and a rise in knife attacks have disturbed the usual tranquility of a country often ranked as the safest in the world, a trend that the Icelandic police hope will be short-lived. The country of only 375,000 people is more accustomed to reading about murders in its famed Icelandic noir novels than in its morning newspapers. In fact, only 4 people have been shot dead in the country in more than 2 decades. However, 4 shootings have now taken place in a little over a year. In February, 2 separate drug-related shootings took place in Reykjavik 2 days apart, one in the city center. The gang violence is similar to that already seen in other parts of Europe. The superintendent of Iceland's elite police unit, known as the Viking Squad, expressed concern, saying it takes 5 to 10 years for what is trending in Europe to show up in the country. Officials nonetheless assured residents and visitors that Iceland remains a relatively safe country.
Important to note that Iceland is still a country that has extremely low crime rate. We're still on the top of the Global Peace Index. And I mean, homicide rates have not been going up, and neither have attempted homicides.
Iceland has topped the Global Peace Index ranking since 2008 thanks to its low crime rate and strong education and welfare systems. It is also commended for its fair pay and the absence of tension between its social classes.
The looming execution of Melissa Lucio, who was sentenced to death in a controversial case for the murder of her toddler daughter, provoked backlash from celebrities and a growing movement that reaches well beyond U.S. borders. Lucio is to be put to death on April 27 for the 2007 murder of her 2-year-old daughter, Mariah. After saying that she had not done it nearly 100 times to the police, she made a completely extorted confession, according to Sabrina Van Tassel, director of the hit documentary The State of Texas vs. Melissa. Arguing there's no DNA in witness, Van Tassel said that the confession was the only thing they had against Melissa Lucio. She was convinced that there is nothing that connects Lucio to the death of her child. None of Melissa's children had accused her of being violent. As for the prosecutor, he was later sentenced to prison for corruption and extortion. Lucio's case sparked a whole movement among many, including Kim Kardashian, French former presidential candidate Christian Taubira, the Latin American media, and U.S. Republicans.
President Joe Biden Jr. will meet virtually with Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India. The leaders are set to discuss cooperation on issues including ending the pandemic, countering the climate crisis, strengthening the global economy, and upholding a free, open, rules-based international order to bolster security, democracy, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. The leaders will advance ongoing conversations about the development of an Indo-Pacific economic framework and delivering high-quality infrastructure. Biden last spoke to Prime Minister Modi with other Quad leaders in March.
Moms in Texas through the Jack and Jill of America Incorporated join other mothers from across the United States in teaching the younger generation how to be a benefit to the community. Today, we get to discover how these moms nurture future leaders. Correspondent Jane Kathleen Gregorio speaks with some of them in a recent outreach in San Antonio.
We're here today in San Antonio, Texas, where we will discover how a group of moms are working together to help children develop leadership skills through the Jack and Jill Foundation. Originally founded in 1938 by the late Marion Stubbs in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Jack and Jill of America Incorporated was a program to help nurture children to become future leaders through leadership development, volunteer service, philanthropic giving, and civic duty.
Jack and Jill of America Incorporated is an organization, it's a nationwide organization that of mothers that provide leadership and community service for children. And we have a local chapter here in San Antonio. Well, we host different programs based on each age group each month. And so this particular event is a community service event that is teaching our students how to give back to the community. We pick a charity to donate to, and so we have chosen the San Antonio Food Bank. It has been great. We've collected, I don't know how much online, but I've gotten several notifications that we've had financial donations so far, and we've had people trickling in since 11 a.m. this morning. I love giving back to my community and also being an example to our children so that they know to also give back, because we've been blessed with so much.
A typical day in Jack and Jill is many meetings focusing on what can we do next for our children. Previously, we did the Love and Luggage event where we donated over 32 bags altogether with different items. We donated books, we donated clothes, hair products, things that people that are displaced from their home, they won't have. It's the basic needs. As parents, as mothers of this organization, we want our kids to be future leaders, be the next president or be the next congressman or the next leader of whatever organization. We believe in our children and we believe that their future is very bright.
Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Mata ng Agila International, San Antonio, Texas. Trusted, connected, on point.
In a recent tweet, Britain's embattled Finance Minister Rishi Sunak asked the government's ethics advisor to review whether he followed all the rules after revelations about his family's financial affairs stoked political controversy. Sunak is facing criticism from the opposition Labour Party in connection with his wife Ashkata Murthy's tax exemption status in the country. My overriding concern is that the public retain confidence in the answers they are given, and I believe the best way of achieving this is to ensure those answers are entirely independent without bias or favor. Sunak wrote that in his letter to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Now, after initially claiming his spouse was the victim of a smear campaign, the couple U-turned last Friday and vowed she would now pay British taxes on all her global income.
In Spain, authorities have seized nearly 1,100 stuffed animals, mainly or many of them endangered species. The private collection was discovered in a shed near Valencia in eastern Spain. The collection included a taxidermied Bengal tiger, cheetahs, lynxes, polar bears, and white rhinos, as well as 198 elephant tusks. More than 400 of the animals are classified as protected, endangered, or extinct. Authorities estimate the value of the collection at 32 million American dollars. That's more than 1.6 billion pesos. The owner of the collection is under investigation for smuggling and several environmental crimes.
Another milestone for the International Space Station as it puts out the welcome mat for the first fully private mission. A 4-member crew from startup company Axiom Space arrived at the space station on the weekend. Commanding the mission is former NASA astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria. The three paying crewmates include U.S. real estate investor Larry Connor, Canadian investor and philanthropist Mark Pathy, and former Israeli fighter pilot and investor Eitan Stibbe. The 8-day mission will see the four carry out 25 research projects. They range from a demonstration of self-assembling smart tiles to cancer research. Planning 3 more missions at the space station, AGM eventually looks to build its own private space station. The first module is due to launch in 2024.
Now, here's a dining experience with a difference. Enjoy a meal in a restaurant suspended more than 50 meters above the ground. This towering eatery is located in Jakarta, Indonesia. Dubbed the Lounge in the Sky, it is suspended by a crane and dangles more than 50 meters in the air. The restaurant rotates to give diners a view of the city. Some patrons said they found it a bit unnerving at first, with one saying it took them an hour before he was calm enough to eat. Inside there are 8 tables for 4. Harness the security guests to their seats. There are also restrictions for guests. Customers must be over 17, weigh no more than 150 kilograms, and be at least 145 centimeters tall. In bad weather, the Lounge in the Sky is grounded.
Over 20 photographs depicting life in Asturias, an autonomous community in Spain, are displayed in an open-air exhibit for people walking along 16th Street in Washington to see. Let's find out more from Arlene Ocampo.
Here in Washington, the Visions of Asturias exhibition is currently on display on the outer fence of the former residence of the ambassadors of Spain. This showcase of photographs includes pieces from Spanish National Photography Prize winners of this particular region in northern Spain, highlighting their vision of that part of Spain. The initiative has Alberto Garcia Alex, Jose Manuel Ballester, Oka Leal, and Chema Mados as featured photographers. More than 20 photographs are on display. Visions of Asturias is a project of the Fundación María Cristina Massivo Peterson that began in 2012. It was an avenue for the winners of the National Photography Prize to produce work concentrating on the Asturias region and its people. The unique pieces are incorporated into the Foundation's art collection. As an extension of this open-air photography display, the Cultural Office will screen documentaries about 3 of the photographers included in the exhibition. On April 20th, a documentary about Ocalil will be shown. Visit spainculture.us for more about the exhibits. Arlene Ocampo, Matanang Agila International, Washington, D.C., trusted, connected.
Coming right up, Twitter's top shareholder Elon Musk decides not to join the social media platform's board. Australian Grand Prix set a record-breaking attendance since 1996. And Hollywood actor Will Smith responds to Academy's 10-year Oscar ban. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break.
This portion is brought to you by SCCI Management and Insurance Agency Corporation and Source Alliance.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, Gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
This portion is brought to you by Canrev Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more information, please contact Ami Kanke.
The world's wealthiest man and largest shareholder of Twitter, Elon Musk, is no longer joining the board of social media firm. Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal in his tweet said Musk has decided not to join the board. The announcement is a reversal less than a week after announcing the Tesla chief would be appointed in the board following his acquisition of a major stake in the firm, which made him its largest shareholder. In a statement sent to his team, Agrawal said Elon's appointment to the board was to become official effective April 9. But Musk shared that same morning that he will no longer be joining the board, which Agrawal believed to be for the best. Agrawal added that Twitter will remain open to Elon's input. Billionaire tech entrepreneur Musk is a frequent Twitter user, regularly mixing in inflammatory and controversial statements about issues or other public figures with remarks that are whimsical or business-focused. He has also sparred repeatedly with federal securities regulators who cracked down on his social media use after a purported effort to take Tesla private in 2018 fell apart.
Top-ranked Scotty Scheffler wins the 86th Masters, cementing his world #1 status with an impressive three-shot victory over Rory McIlroy at Augusta National. Scheffler fired a final round at 1 under par 71 to finish 72 holes 10 under 278 and defeat four-time major winner McIlroy by 3 strokes, with Australian Cameron Smith and Ireland's Shane Lowry sharing third on 283.
Now, it might have been Tiger Woods' worst finish ever at the Masters, but the 15-time major champion said it was one of his greatest achievements. On Sunday, Woods completed his improbable return to professional golf's most prestigious tournament. after a major car crash that left him with injuries so severe he thought he might even lose his right leg. Many thought Woods' golfing career was certainly over. His car rolled over 14 months ago. Last week, he made his return to golfing at the Augusta National Golf Club, aiming for a 6th Masters green jacket. He finished with a final round of 78 and 13 over par 301. He placed 47th in the tournament. But for Woods, this Masters wasn't about winning. After the tournament, he said being back on the green and experiencing the support and affection of fans was an unbelievable feeling.
Nearly 420,000 spectators poured into Albert Park over the Australian Grand Prix, organizers said Monday. This set a new attendance record at the circuit and was one of the highest in the sport's history. Melbourne was back on the calendar this year after missing out in 2020 and 2021 because of the coronavirus pandemic and travel restrictions. It returned with a bang as fans flocked to the track to witness Ferrari's Charles Leclerc win his second race of the year to stretch his World Championship lead. Organizers said more than 419,000 people attended over the 4 days, eclipsing the previous record of 401,000 set at Melbourne's inaugural Grand Prix in 1996. Australian Grand Prix chief Andrew Westacott described the weekend as the happiest sporting event he had ever been to. Race organizers put the massive Melbourne crowd down to a combination of a new audience attracted through the Netflix series Drive to Survive, fine weather, and fans desperate for high-speed action after missing out for 2 years.
Will Smith will not be allowed to attend the Academy Awards for the next 10 years as a result of his slapping comedian Chris Rock on stage during this year's Oscars ceremony, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts Sciences announced in an open letter. Now, that means the Best Actor will not be allowed to present the award to next year's Best Actress winner, a time-honored tradition at the Oscars. Smith issued a brief statement on his ban from the Oscars for the next decade. I accept and respect the Academy's decision, the actor said to the press. The Academy's decision was made during a Board of Governors meeting. The Academy, through David Rubin and Don Hudson, also apologized for not adequately addressing the situation during its telecast and extended its deep gratitude to Chris Rock for maintaining his composure under extraordinary circumstances. It also hopes that this can be the start of a time of healing and restoration for all involved.
British pop icon Harry Styles has entered the charts at #1 with his new single As It Was, ending Dave's 4-week reign at the top. The star's latest single had the biggest opening week of the year so far, said the official charts company, racking up 94,000 chart sales. It was also streamed 10.5 million times over the last week. As It Was becomes Styles' second solo #1, in addition to the 4 he achieved as part of One Direction. It is the first track to be released on his upcoming third album, Harry's House, which is out on May 20.
What happened on this day in history? Let us relive major events from the world of politics, entertainment, sports, and more. On April 11, 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte abdicated his throne as Emperor of France. In the Treaty of Fontainebleau, he was exiled to the Mediterranean island of Elba. Napoleon was known to be one of the greatest military leaders in history. Also on this day in 1970, Apollo 13, the third lunar landing mission, was successfully launched from the Cape Canaveral in Florida. The mission was to explore the Ibrium Basin of the Fra Mauro Highlands of the Moon and conduct geological experiments with astronauts James A. Lovell, John Swigert, and Fred Hayes. And in 1979, Ugandan dictator Idi Amin was overthrown by Tanzanian troops and forces of the Ugandan National Liberation Front. Known to be a tyrant and extreme nationalist, Amin launched a genocidal program to purge Uganda of its Lango and Acholi ethnic groups.
Before we conclude tonight's broadcast, let us be reminded by a quote from Mike Krzyzewski, also known as Coach K, who once coached the United States national basketball team. He said, "Great rivalries don't have to be built on hatred. They are built on respect, on a respect for excellence."
That's a lovely quote.
Yeah, you know, in a utopian world, there is equality, but in reality, there could never be right. But I think healthy competition would do the trick for all the different countries.
And it's very apt to know this quote. I mean, it's the election year in the Philippines, not just in the Philippines, but like in other places around the world as well. And, you know, I listened to that quote, and in my head, I'm thinking that should be like a basic requirement or basic thing that you do when you're in any relationship.
Exactly.
Right? You don't
shouldn't
have to
look at one another as competition, right?
Yeah, it has to be based on what's right, or, you know, just to understand each other.
Respect should be your priority.
Yes, respect. Remember that. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hirro.
And I am Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
This program is supported by SMC Global Power.
Ano ang pinakamalaking mammal? Blue whale. So, sinasagot ko na kasi